Christchurch City Council is, gosh, what a fascinating place to be that must be. But the Christchurch City Council has obviously needed to rebuild the city after extraordinary, the earthquake and the extraordinary rebuilding period has made Christchurch actually, in 2025, one of the coolest places in the world to be. No question about that. Or certainly in New Zealand. House prices are much cheaper than you'd expect in Christchurch. New builds, not, and the place has grown like topsy, with suburbs on the outskirts also receiving that growth. Rolleston, Lincoln being two really good examples. The Selwyn District Council, which adjoins the Christchurch District Council, I think it's the fastest growing council or fastest growing territory in New Zealand. But in the midst of all that, the Christchurch City Council has decided to, and has looked at a number of ways in which it can improve housing density in Christchurch, because I guess there's still a lot of red zone land. There's a lot of people who want to live there. You've got to work out what you want to do. And the Christchurch City Council has. It says, right, these are the regulations we want to effect under their mayor that was elected, I think, at the last election, Mayor Phil Major. Well, the latest recommendations were sent up to Wellington. I don't know why they were sent up to Wellington, because I always thought the city councils were responsible for their own building regulations, but there you go. And incredibly, the government, through the Minister for RMA Reform, Chris Bishop, has given the Christchurch City Council his decisions on 20 alternative recommendations put forward to them, and he has rejected most of them. He's accepted only 3 of the 20, deferred 3, and the other 14 decisions that the Christchurch City Council made after hearing a number of changes to their plan, he's rejected. The decisions take immediate effect, and for example, they will now increase the high density zoning for a number of sort of quite popular suburbs, Hornby, Riccarton and Linwood. He's also rejected the council's recommendation, which was sought to apply a special citywide restriction to developments to provide greater sunlight access than is currently the case, and which was a major concern, obviously, of neighbours suddenly having a house that rises above you, shuts out not simply your privacy, but also your sun as well. Well, understandable. We wouldn't like that happening to us. But the government said, no, we're not going to go ahead with that, overruled it. And to join us to talk about that is Christchurch City Councillor Mark Peters, and he joins us now. Mark, welcome to the show. Love to have you on.
Kia ora. Thank you, Michael.
Listen, you are a Christchurch City Councillor. You presumably have been through plan changes to try and make sure that when people build houses and that they look okay and that they do their job and that they're not irritating the neighbours. But you've been overruled by central government. What's the feeling of your council and councillors on that?
Well, it's fair to say that we're pretty gutted and very disappointed in the Minister's decision. We worked very hard to energise our communities and have them involved in the hearings process. And then when we pulled together and got our recommendations to send to the Minister, we felt we'd actually been quite pragmatic and come to a nice middle ground that the communities could live with, but would still achieve a lot of what the Minister was asking. So we're very disappointed to see the outcome.
So just let's get this right. You're housing in Christchurch, and you've got presumably low, medium and high density housing. Is that how it's defined in your plans?
Well, by and large, we've got a lot of low density housing, sort of, a typical section of 600 or 700 square metres with one unit on it. Then we have a ever-growing number of medium density, where you've got maybe 5 or 6, 7 units on a similar sized parcel. So we are intensifying pretty well with the existing planning rules that we've had in place. And this planning change has come about primarily because the government's NPSUD, which is a national policy statement on the high density housing, and they were requiring greater densification around the commercial centres and along prime transport routes. And we were really working hard as a city to find a happy middle ground which our communities could live with. For instance, in Hornby, we've ended up with the minister's decision to say 10-storey buildings in our commercial centre. Now, Hornby's never seen a 10-storey building in its commercial centre, and that understandably makes the local community incredibly nervous to think about 10 stories in their commercial centre, which is right on the corner of State Highway 1, so it's a prime location. We have known in this location 6 stories. We had what was known as the Clock Tower building, which was the Central Canterbury Electrical Power Board 6-storey building called the Clock Tower, and that was accepted, and I would hazard to say even loved by the locals here. That was destroyed post-earthquake and taken down. So we came to the point, particularly out here in Hornby, that 6 stories, well, people knew it, and I believe could have lived with that. But the Minister, in his infinite wisdom, said, no, I know better. We'll allow 10 stories in your commercial area of Hornby.
Sorry, I'm a bit bemused as to why, and I suppose a number of people listening to this too would be, what don't you like about 10-storey buildings? Is it because they're an earthquake risk or what?
Well, there's a bit of that. People are nervous about the earthquake risk. Post-earthquake, when the plan change was come about through the earthquake recovery process, they'd put a limitation of about 7 stories in the CBD even. So to put 10 stories now out into the suburbs really makes it a towering and imposing statement into those communities. Now, we're not expecting to see these buildings happening anytime soon, but to have that enabled really does worry a lot of the local communities.
Okay, I probably couldn't get too upset about that from an outsider's perspective that you've got to, and no, but there are other issues that are here, and particularly it's residential homes. The decisions that are made on the residential homes in Christchurch, does that mean that somebody, if I'm living in, as you've just said, on a 700 square section, I've got the family home, somebody can now, in most of inner city Christchurch anyhow, go and build a large residential complex next door to me?
Well, in here in Christchurch, a lot of the people are quite happy with the idea of doing that within the 4 avenues, which is our CBD. It's more into the suburbs of the Hornby, the Linwoods, the Riccartons, even Papanuis, that putting multi-storey residential developments out into those suburbs is, understandably making a lot of property owners nervous. A lot of people bought into Christchurch on the premise that they've got their nice little 600 or 700 square metre section with their house on it. Perhaps got a couple of rabbits running around the backyard, have a bit of green space, and now to have the possibility of having 4-storey units chucked onto a section neighbouring you with no concern for the sunlight access, as you've rightly pointed out. We worked hard for that sunlight access provision because we're at a lower latitude to the likes of Auckland and Wellington. We do in our winters, treasure what little bit of sun we do get, and to have it blocked out by a multi-storey apartment next door really does not make for a nice living environment for a lot of people.
So I'm assuming that there are zones now in Christchurch in which there will be high density as a consequence of this that will do the things you suggest. If I want to go and live in a place where I can't have that kind of residential development next door to me, I can go somewhere else, can I, and evade these recommendations. Is that right?
Yeah, because these recommendations have really been pulled around the commercial hubs and the main hubs of the proposed transit system that's going to hopefully come into Christchurch, and trying to densify those hubs and those routes of those transport links is really what this is about. We don't in any way begrudge the idea of densifying those areas. We understand that we need to densify around those transport routes, but it's when it starts to stretch out too far into the suburbia and the residential living space that we tend to get a little bit nervous. And we love the fact that we're in Christchurch. Christchurch is a great place to be, as you've rightly said. We've recovered well post-earthquake, and people choose to live here because they love it. And to have the...
Yes, you've become quite sexy really at the moment, haven't you, really? I mean, seriously.
Yes, absolutely.